Greetings, I'm your host, Dr. Wolfula, with an interruption of our regularly scheduled Universal Horror Month reviews with a review of the latest DC superhero movie, Batman and the Flash, starring Michael Keaton returning to his iconic role as the Caped Crusader, with Ezra Miller playing the Flash in a supporting role ×2.
Yeah, I'm Batman.
Now, I know there was a lot of controversy surrounding Ezra Miller returning as the Flash, what with Ezra Miller eating babies and chopping those nuns up into little pieces in his shed, but trust me, once you watch their latest film, you're going to forget all about Ezra Miller's lifelong allegiance to Satan. It's just that good.
Dude, this is catastrophic.
Okay, yeah, this is technically a Flash movie, and it mostly is, but like nearly everything DC on screen these days, it just has to have a heavy dose of Batman in it. Warner Brothers has absolutely no faith in their DC characters besides Batman.
Did our decision to make The Flash, the fact that we'd be able to bring Michael Keaton back as the Tim Burton Batman.
But admittedly, I would have never have watched this movie if it didn't have Batman in it, especially the Michael Keaton Batman. The first Batman for a lot of folks, which is part of why WB is marketing this film so heavily off of the Burton Batman nostalgia.
It was very exciting to me because I saw Batman in the movies when I was a teenager.
And I'm guilty of enabling this approach to DC's non-Batman films by seeing this movie, but come on, Keaton looks so cool in that suit, and the 1989 Batmobile's a thing I've seen before. It doesn't do anything in the movie, but it's an old thing I like. I get to see it again. I get to look at it. I could just watch the old movie, but I get to see it in a new thing not being used.
I used to see this thing on the news when I was a kid.
WB has mostly learned its lesson in recent years, making its fair share of Batman-less DC films to mixed success. It's hard to make a shared universe feel exciting when you know it's not going anywhere in the long run.
Shouldn't we have a league of our own?
And it's hard to make a character like Aquaman feel new and interesting, being reintroduced to him in his own movie after meeting him already in a shitty crossover film that was made only moderately less shitty in a director's cut released a few years later.
I hear you can talk to fish.
Point is, though, with the first draft of a DC shared movie universe winding down, The Flash sees WB going back to their roots with a Flash movie that's heavy on the Batman, relying on the Caped Crusaders and even Man of Steel's mythos more than having any interest in properly establishing a cinematic take on the Scarlet Speedster, because what's the point at this stage anyway? This movie's been delayed for years, this cinematic universe is ending, and in the span of this DC cinematic universe's entire existence, there's been a whole Flash TV series that ended this year after 9 seasons.
Found Barry Allen. No! What does that mean? How can this...
This Flash movie was announced years ago, and after all this time, nobody was clamoring for it. Might as well throw a Batman or 3 into it.
What's milk?
All that said, though, as a DC movie, I had a good time watching The Flash. It really feels like not only a goodbye to this flawed first take on a DC movie universe, but also it manages to be a fond farewell to many of the DC movies and shows that preceded it, with a kooky time travel plot that feels like a microcosm of a crisis storyline from the comics.
Oh, this rips!
I'm a casual fan of Flash. A lot of my familiarity with him comes from the Michael Rosenbaum portrayal of Wally West in the Justice League cartoons, and reading some random issues of the comics, so I can't say a lot about how well this film portrays the character and his mythos beyond preferring this movie's sleek wetsuit costume over that old armored abomination. The hell were they thinking with that shit?
Why are you here?
Oh, right. 'Cause it's Flash Appreciation Day?
All I can really talk about with Ezra Miller's take on Barry Allen is how he's presented in this movie taken by itself, and I feel like, considering all the other stuff going on in it, the titular character doesn't get lost in the high-speed shuffle. They managed to establish Barry's role within the Justice League in a very exciting but weird way in the opening scenes, where he saves creepy CGI babies falling out of a hospital window in slow motion. And they also efficiently established this Flash's origin story without slowing things down, which is what you don't want to do in a Flash movie.
You're supposed to put it on before it hits the floor.
Setting aside the fact that Ezra Miller was recently recorded using their Flash boots to stomp a small kitten to death, I enjoyed their performance overall, even if they did feel like a strange choice for the Flash. You look at Barry Allen in the comics, and he's a total man's man Chad, and then you look at Ezra Miller's Flash, and they're a neurotic twink. Not what you expect, but it works in its own way.
Passing you into Mr. Wayne.
No, please don't.
I need you here now, Barry.
Miller plays a Barry Allen who feels taken for granted by his superhero peers. His mother was mysteriously killed, and like OJ before him, Barry's father, the guy from Office Space, has been wrongly accused of the slaying. But unlike OJ, Barry's father seems to have no hope of release from prison. So with an uncertain future, Barry uses his powers to go back in time to stop his mother's death, but things get complicated when he finds himself stuck in 2013, coexisting with a younger version of himself, an even more annoying version of himself, no less.
It's my face. You stole my face.
The Flash riffs heavily on the much-explored multiverse trend we've been seeing a lot of in movies lately, especially superhero movies, and it even makes a lot of Back to the Future references much in the same way another time-travel superhero flick did. But in the Flash's defense, it doesn't lean too hard into the fan service that comes with these multiverse films, at least right away. It takes its time to get to the fan service, spending the first half focusing on Barry Allen and his 10 years younger doppelganger, an interesting idea where the older Barry gets to be a mentor for his younger self, guiding the younger Barry along.
We're Barry.
The two Barrys are played pretty convincingly by Miller, and all they did to the young Barry was give him longer hair, and Ezra Miller just has to play the 18-year-old Barry as more obnoxious, making the older one seem mature in comparison.
Barry, what are you doing?
Our kids are gonna want to see this.
It's like the Winklevoss twins in Social Network, where I could let it trick my brain into thinking there are two Ezra Millers on screen. And much like the Winklevoss twins, the Barrys are also played by a real-life cannibal. Hell, if there weren't any effects involved, I think they just cloned Ezra Miller, but thankfully they didn't, because double the Ezra Miller means double the real-life danger. Eventually, General Zod emerges in this timeline, much as he did in Man of Steel, seemingly after Clark Kent. So the two Barrys seek out the help of Batman to find Soups, but it's not the Batman one of the Barrys expected.
Things have changed. Gotham's now one of the safest cities in the world.
I had mixed emotions about this film's use of Michael Keaton's Batman. Besides some fun little references and some gags about his gadgets being archaic,
Gonna hack the Soviet security with a flip phone.
Let's get nuts.
very little about how they handle the '89 Batman in this film feels specific to Tim Burton's depiction of the character. It feels like any version of Batman could have fit into this role. They could have given Nolan the finger and put Christian Bale's Batman in here, or even just had a younger version of Ben Affleck's Batman participating in the battle against the invading Kryptonians, especially since we never really got to spend much time getting to know Affleck's Batman, ironically. He overshadowed the other heroes, but he never got his own standalone picture out of the whole bunch.
So you're saying we could travel back in time?
But, you know, if they were gonna use any Batman, I'm glad it ended up being Keaton, because not only am I a big fan of Keaton, but it's also an opportunity before the big universe reboot to pay tribute to DC's legacy films with the oldest living actor to portray Batman on film. And Keaton feels like a match for Ezra Miller's Flash. Keaton's Bruce Wayne having been very neurotic himself.
Now you want to get nuts? Come on, let's get nuts.
And it's great seeing Michael Keaton play this offbeat version of Batman again. And thanks to CGI, he doesn't miss a step, doing things as an old man he could never do as a young man, because the tech just wasn't there to make it so he could turn his head.
You actually did it.
Because Keaton's suit is just molded rubber muscles, and you only ever see his chin, his age once he was in the suit didn't even register for me. It looked like he could have walked right off the set of Batman Returns and onto the set of this movie without the 30 years in between.
I'm Batman.
Speaking of things not registering, though, the movie also has a take on Supergirl in it that's admittedly wasted. His cousin Kara Zor-El, played by Sasha Kaye, takes his place, rescued by bats and the Flashes from a Siberian prison. But instead of being an adaptation of the Supergirl from the comics, for all intents and purposes, this Kara just feels like a gender-swapped Clark Kent down to the black hair.
I will help you fight Zod.
And her journey as a character has to be fast-tracked because this is ultimately a Flash film, and this Supergirl reaches no satisfying conclusion to what little arc she had.
I wish I would have had a hero like the Supergirl that we've created when I was little.
It just feels like they really wanted to add a Superman-like figure in this film, but they knew they wouldn't have time to properly develop an alternate universe Superman. The CW already shot the Brandon Routh wad after all, so just make Superman a girl. That's different enough. WB will do anything but bring back Henry Cavill and Ray Fisher. They're the only actors in this film that don't get a farewell, but their characters manage to be frequently referenced regardless. It's kinda sad. The Flash's plot leads to a lot of fun, and it did manage to make me emotionally invested in its hero, despite the actor portraying him hijacking that school bus and driving it off a cliff. But the movie is also obviously really unfocused. It's all over the place with no strong central villain. Michael Shannon as Zod is barely in the movie, and it seems like they just deep-faked him.
This world must die.
If you were hoping to see actual villains from Flash's Rogues Gallery, they're not here. The only actual Flash villain we ever got in these movies was fucking killed. Flash time travels to save his mom, but he never bothers to find out who killed her to begin with, so no Reverse Flash in this movie. There is a Reverse Flash-like figure that emerges as the main villain in the end, but it feels half-baked. The plot of The Flash just has questionable stakes where Barry has to save an alternate universe Earth from General Zod, with the only motivation being this is a universe where his mother lives.
Because this is the world where my mom lived.
It's kind of flimsy, and it technically really just doesn't go anywhere. Andy Muschietti, the Flash's director, also directed those It movies, and much like with those films, he drops the ball with the movie's finale. But at least with The Flash, it has a fun fan-servicey sequence in the end that leads to a strong emotional payoff, if not an action-packed one. And the movie ultimately ends consequence-free besides a cute little gag. With the universe reboot looming, I would have thought WB would have used this movie to segue into the next stage of DC on film, but this movie was made long before a decision was reached to start over again with James Gunn in the reins, so this isn't quite the Flashpoint adaptation it could have been. When they were making this movie, they thought things were really gonna keep going the way they were, so don't want to mess with the status quo too much, if only they knew.
You can also destroy everything.
All things said, The Flash was pretty fun to watch overall, even if it does feel like inconsequential fan service at the end of the day. As a DC fan though, it kinda felt like a live-action episode of Justice League Unlimited, like that story arc, The Once and Future Thing, where in that show they could tell fun, one-off stories involving time travel where everything goes back the way it was in the end, but it was a fun ride, and you got some cool fan service in the process. It's just a live-action version of that this time. I can understand skipping The Flash because of Ezra Miller kicking that pregnant woman in the stomach at the film's premiere, but if you can disregard that, and if you're a fan of DC, or at least Batman, especially Michael Keaton's take, I think you'll have a decently good time watching The Flash. I give The Flash Barry Allen's dead mother out of Bruce Wayne's dead parents. I did think it was kind of weird when Ezra Miller broke character in the movie and said they were the devil and their eyes rolled in the back of their head as they screeched expletives.
Our kids are gonna want to see this.
If you liked this video, like it, and if you loved it, click the subscribe and bell buttons for more vids. I'd also like to thank these fine folks pledged my shout-out tier on Patreon for all their kind support. Videos like this wouldn't be possible without all their help. Thank you for watching, see you next time. Dr. Wolfula signing out.